everyone, and thank you for joining us on Convergence on Afrovibes Radio. We are thrilled to have in the audience, actually, thrilled to have in the studio, we are thrilled to have Jill Campbell with Baker Ripley. She's an attorney there, and she's got interesting information and stories to share with us today on Convergence. So thank you for joining us and taking your time out on a 4th of July holiday weekend.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So we have an audience of over 178 countries. So just to level set, what is Baker Ripley?
Yeah, so Baker Ripley is a Houston-based nonprofit. We do community development. We're in the business of helping people, what we say, earn, learn, and belong. So get, better employment so they can earn more for their families, increase their education and belong and feel like they're actually part of their community. So as part of community development, we do everything ranging from senior services to adult education, GED programs, after school programs for youth, and the program that I work for, which is the Immigration and Citizenship Program. So my program focuses on helping low-income community members primarily here across Houston go further in their pathway to U.S. citizenship with the goal that we help everyone become a U.S. citizen.
Excellent, excellent. So you're involved because you're an attorney with Baker Ripley, and you were sharing with me before we went on a little bit about the structure of what Baker Ripley does with the legal aspect. So you're an attorney and you're amongst a group of other attorneys?
Yes, so we have a legal program that has 3 staff attorneys, including me, and 4 what we call DOJ accredited representatives. It's a program here in the United States. Department of Justice. Yes.
All of our folks
Department of Justice. So yes. So it's a special program where someone can become authorized to practice immigration law even though they're not an attorney. They can only do it for a nonprofit and for a nonprofit that's been vetted. So because of that, we have 7 individuals who can actually represent immigrants in legal cases. We have a small support staff as well. So our agency is very large, our program is relatively small, but we do have a huge impact. We give Know Your Rights presentations to immigrants throughout the community, especially in light of what's going on under this new administration. It's very important for immigrants to understand how to interact with law enforcement officials and how to interact with immigration officials. We do that for thousands of individuals. We have a legal services hotline that we participate in. So if someone is afraid or concerned, they can call a hotline and speak with us. Then we also do direct representation in legal cases. We usually represent about 800 individuals a year.
Okay, so during the program, we're going to definitely give out that number, that legal hotline. So definitely stay with us. So since we have an international audience, and I'm not sure exactly what media is being portrayed internationally, I thought I'd give us an opportunity for us to share on Afrovibes Radio on Convergence, to share and level set the playing field so everyone who is our listener will understand what is happening with the decisions that our president has made and how is it pertain to immigration. So if you can help level set us as to what are the immigration issues that our brothers and sisters who are coming from south of the border are experiencing, and what are they experiencing once they get here?
So kind of, I guess, what's been in the news recently, they call it family separation. And what it really is separating asylum seekers, separating the parents from the children when they arrive at the border. And so first we want to talk about who this population is who's arriving at the southern border. So we're in Texas right now, for everyone, geographically, that's where we're at. And then Texas borders Mexico on our southern border. And so let's talk about the population who's arriving at the southern border. So this is typically going to be Central Americans who are fleeing their home countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and a few from Nicaragua right now because there's a lot of political turmoil that's going on in Nicaragua. And they're coming across Mexico and they're arriving at the southern border. And they're coming as asylum seekers, and I guess the word we would know across the world is refugees. They're fleeing in Central America, terrible gang violence, cartel violence, and with these women who are fleeing here, a lot of them are fleeing domestic violence and sexual abuse. They're coming from countries that have failed to protect them from these groups in their country. And unfortunately, groups like the cartels in Central America target children. So especially children that are coming of age. So when a young man is turning 12, 13 years old in those countries, that's when the gang starts coming around to try to recruit them or bring them in or help them traffic drugs. And if you refuse to be recruited for these gangs, you're killed by the gangs. Anyone who crosses these gangs is terminated, is murdered. And so these families, when they have these teenage children, they're saying, look, we have to leave, we have to flee, or we're going to die. So that's who's coming across the border. But also, it's worth noting, the border isn't just Central Americans coming here. It's people from all over the world. And one of the reasons is because one of the migration routes for people that are fleeing Africa or Asia is to come in across the ocean and into South America or Central America, and then go across Mexico and arrive at the southern border. So asylum seekers that are arriving are also from Africa, also from Asia, many from Afghanistan, Nepal, Congo, Ethiopia, Eritrea, other countries that are in crisis right now. And so it's not just our Central Americans. You know, the family who is the plaintiff in the lawsuit that ACLU has filed is actually a Congolese woman. One of the first people to be separated from her children is an asylum seeker arriving at the border. So that's the population we're talking about. When they arrive at the border, so if you enter the border without authorization, meaning you come and you try to cross the river, for example. We have a river that creates that border between Texas and Mexico, the Rio Grande River.
Right.
You try to cross that river, or if your guide, or your coyote as we call it, your guide who's helping you cross, if you end up anywhere at or inside the border, you have, you're technically considered, undocumented.
Yes.
It's a unlawful entry, as we say. And typically in the past, as soon as Border Patrol, who are immigration authorities, catch you at or around the border, they're going to place you into immigration proceedings. You're in the custody of ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Let's think of those as the cops for immigration.
Okay.
And you're placed in what we call deportation proceedings, which is a hearing in front of a judge where they initiate to try to remove you from the country or kick you out of the country through deportation. What changed in May was that the president said, instead of just putting you into deportation proceedings when we catch you at the border, we're going to first actually criminally prosecute you. Because under federal law in United States, there is a misdemeanor federal crime of what we call illegal entry, which is someone who's found at or around the border who has entered the country without permission.
So that's changed.
That's what changed. That's the only thing that changed. And everything that happened after that is like a domino effect. So what that means is now when they apprehend one of those families, they're going to criminally prosecute the parent. And like when we incarcerate anyone in the United States, we separate you from your child because a child can't go into federal prison.
Mm-hmm.
So the parent is taken under federal custody, put through the federal criminal prosecution, just like anyone else in the United States who's committing any other federal crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, the children are handed over to Health and Human Services and put into immigration deportation proceedings in their own centers. We call them shelters. They're not shelters, they're centers where children are detained. And then the adults are criminally prosecuted, and after their criminal prosecution is finished, which again is just a misdemeanor, most of them usually plead out to a fine and nothing else.
Right.
They're really in federal custody for most of them for less than a day.
Right.
Then they're handed over to ICE custody, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, immigration custody, and placed into their own deportation proceedings. But at that point, the separation has happened. And at that point, there's no effort by the federal government to reunite them or bring them back together. Because both parent and child are in federal custody, they can be transferred anywhere across the country without notice. So you might have a child who's in California detained, and then the parent is in New York. Then the child's transferred to Seattle, and the parent's in Houston. So sometimes they won't even be in the same parts of the country. And in addition, at least especially in this first month of family separation, there is no effort on behalf of the federal government to even tell you where your child was.
Wow.
So you're sitting in this federal detention center, you know no one in the United States, you've just fled for your life to come to the United States, your child is taken away from you, and you have no idea where your child is at.
And the child could be any age, right?
Yes, so they were taking children away, no one that we knew directly, but 18 months. So, young. I think they said under the age of 5, they call it tender age. I think the one that came out in the lawsuit today, there might be 100 tender age children. So all in all, the original estimation was that 2,300 children were taken from their parents just in this six-week span, and now it's looking like it was more like 3,000. So that's how family separation happened, right? And still to this day, these children are detained and the adults are detained. I mean, they're still being processed for deportation. They're going to court hearings, but some really scary things happened in between all of that. One is no efforts to reunite the parents with the children. The first messaging was, oh, well, there's a hotline in the detention centers the parents can call to find out where their kid is at. The first time that members of our legal staff went into the detention centers, that hotline did not work. There was no efforts on behalf of immigration to try to connect the parents with their children. It just, what they were saying they were putting into effect to help the parents, on the ground it just wasn't happening. There was no affirmative effort to reunite these children or help the parents find out where their children were located. In addition, it became pretty common in the last few weeks for immigration officers to say, well, we'll reunite you with your kid, but you need to sign this document. And what is this document? It's you signing your own deportation and agreeing to go back to your home country. So parents were faced during these last few weeks with the decision of, I can sit here and fight my deportation and try to stay here and stay safely in the United States and not know where my child is at and live in just absolute misery, not knowing where my child is at every single day. Or I could just agree to be deported with this promise that I'll see my kid at the airport on the way out as I'm being deported, that we'll be reunited on the way out. And I mean, to force someone to make that decision, to kind of hold reunification with your child as this, this holding it from you in an effort to try to convince you to deport yourself. I mean, this is the way that these individuals had no due process rights. This isn't due process.
Right.
This isn't America. This isn't what we do.
Right.
We don't hold children hostage from their parents to convince parents to sign their own deportations. And so, again, a lot of confusion on the ground, both for these poor parents who are being detained and also for those of us who are trying to help and trying to figure out what's going on. What happened after about 6 weeks of this practice was the country finally started listening. The country, as you said, you saw the images, right?
Right.
People started going, oh my gosh, this is really going on.
Right.
I can't believe this. And because of all the publicity behind it, the president signed an executive order, which was basically an order to end the policy that he created. So it's like he creates a problem and then signs an order to solve the problem. It's like, well, how about you don't create the problem in the first place? But
that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah. So he signs an order saying we're no longer going to separate families. Well, in effect, that meant there couldn't be the prosecutions, because the next day when they go to prosecute these parents, they realize, wait, what are we going to do? We can't separate them. Well, that means we can't prosecute them. So shortly after, the prosecutions ended. And we really haven't had any of these criminal prosecutions in about a week now.
Okay.
And that was because it just, one couldn't work without the other. That's the domino effect, right? And at the same time, the federal administration decided to go to this court in California and asked to reopen an old case we call the Flores case. What the Flores case was a lawsuit that basically forced the detention of children to have certain conditions. It elevated the conditions for detaining immigrant children in these shelters. And Flores was kind of a protection that children had, that there had to be certain standards upheld in these detention centers. And a couple years ago, the court said that the Flores standards also would pertain to family detention of immigrants. So if you're going to detain the parents and the children together, then these Flores standards cover that as well. And one of those things was that families, if you're going to detain children, you're going to detain families, you should really only be detaining children for about 20 days, no more than 20 days. In reality, they are detained for more than 20 days oftentimes, but so there's a limit. We can't indefinitely detain children. These are babies.
Right.
These are families. You don't lock families up indefinitely. And so the government went to the court in California last week, 2 weeks ago, honestly, time is difficult to manage these days, and said, hey, we don't want you to give Flores protections to family detention centers anymore because we want the ability to detain families indefinitely. So now what the government is saying is we're not going to do family separation, but we want to have the right to detain you indefinitely as a family. Again, still detaining children.
Right. So speaking of time, we have to take a short break. So we will be back to talk a little bit more about the Flores law or family and wrap up any questions and also give out the hotline for on immigration. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned.
Your favorite radio station. This is Afrovibes Radio Houston.
Thank you for staying with us on Convergence, and we are talking with Jill Campbell, and I am really enjoying this conversation to get more understanding about the immigration law and how it's changed and how it's gone back. And before the break, we were talking about Flores, and tell us a little bit more about that. We were just wrapping up about the practices on the Flores case.
Yeah, so I mean, the idea is that the government now wants to be able to detain immigrant families indefinitely. And the government has had no problem explaining their motivation for this. They want it to be a punishment to people who are fleeing here and asking for asylum. They want it to be a deterrent to people who are fleeing here. In actuality, when you're fleeing for your life, you're not going to be really considering too much, the possibility of being detained when you come here, because most of these individuals are fleeing death sentences. But that's where we're at, is family detention is a way to try to deter immigration to the United States. A judge about a week ago also said that all families must be reunited within 30 days.
How's that going to happen?
You tell me. We are awaiting to find out, but I was just reading that the federal government did appear in court today and wasn't able to give too many great explanations on how they plan to do that, and asked for more time to be able to do that, because surprise, surprise, not much organizing went on before they tore these children away from their parents.
Right.
And they're having complications with finding out who belongs to who, or how to reunite these families.
And some of them could be babies.
Babies that, we call them nonverbal, so babies that can't say who their mom is, who their dad is, who they are, how old they are. So this is quite a crisis that has been created really for no reason. Immigration levels of people arriving at the southern border has not increased. Safety and security around the border has not decreased. We're not facing any external threats from people trying to invade our border. This was a crisis that was created and now has torn nearly 3,000 kids away from their parents.
Wow.
So what our office has been doing is we got to focus on getting these parents legal representation.
Okay.
And that's the biggest need right now, is making sure that these parents who are sitting in the detention centers have a lawyer who's speaking for them and who is ensuring that their due process rights and their civil rights are respected, and trying to find out what is going on with their clients' children. So that's part of what we've been doing, in addition to going around and sharing updates on court orders and laws and things like that. We're actually on the ground trying to help these families as well.
Wow, thank you for what you're doing. I mean, it's so much information that's coming through the news. You're like, what is happening today? And it's just amazing. So you all are keeping up with everything, and I appreciate you for coming on Afrovibes Radio on Convergence to talk a little bit more about that. We did mention the number to call, and we're going to repeat that number again. But if you have that number to share on the hotline, because I want to make sure we repeat it a few times during the last part of our broadcast. So what is the number?
Yes, so Baker Ripley is a partner on the Houston Immigrant Rights Hotline, and it's 1-833-HOU IMMI, IMMI, like Houston IMMI.
So it's 833. And it is what? 833.
HOU IMMI.
HOUIMMI. So it stands for Houston and Immigration, I guess. So 1-833-HOUIMMI. And who is to call that number? Anyone who's an immigrant?
Anyone who has any questions at all. It's 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And especially if you have a detained family member in Houston, because we work with our deportation defense team to ensure that we can get people into the detention centers, attorneys to talk to detainees. So, if you have anyone who's in an immigration crisis here in Houston, or how to find a good lawyer here in Houston, or a nonprofit like ourselves to help, it's really just a place for resource.
Excellent. So, now, have you worked with anybody directly? Is there a story that you can talk about, what you all have faced firsthand?
Yeah, I think doing any sort of asylum work, working with refugees, that's probably the most rewarding part of what we do. When we first heard that family separation was ongoing, our legal staff was able to go and connect with separated family members. And, hearing from the attorneys that the parents had no idea their children would be taken from them, being told, oh, we're just going to go take your child for a bath, and then we'll bring your child back, and the child was never returned. Being told, well, you're just going to go to court, and when you come back, the child will be here, and the child wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, for especially the younger children, this is the first time they had ever been separated, period, physically from their parents. And you think of the journey that these parents made from Central America. It's a dangerous journey. And they made it all the way here to the United States. And the worst, thing that could happen happened once they were in the place that was here to protect them. That they struggled, that made that whole journey as a united family, and then they make it here and they're separated. That's the sort of stories that you hear that really put a face and emotions to what's going on politically.
Yeah, it's just hard, even for me doing the interview, it's just really difficult for me to not even cry, just to think about the separations and what the families probably had to go through and where they are now, and to find that they are even struggling to stay together or even find their loved ones. That one could be, like you said, a baby in New York and mother in Houston, and have no idea and how they're going to reconnect. What can we do? I know I'm in Houston, and there are a lot of listeners all around the world. What can we do locally in the Houston area, and what or in the United States, and what can we do internationally?
Mm-hmm. I always say the most important thing to do is to stay educated. Misinformation is our worst enemy. It's so important to know the facts of what's going on so that you can be an educated citizen, an educated voter, an educated friend, an educated family member. Because we're in a place right now where it's astonishing, the misinformation and the negative portrayals of immigrants that we see. And I think it's so important that we understand exactly how the politics are operating and the impact that it's having in our communities. I think donating is incredibly important right now for people that just feel like they want to do something. And what we are always saying is, if you donate to agencies that are doing direct legal services. Fund lawyers. And I said this, last year when anti-immigrant policy started coming out, the lawyers are going to be the people who are able to stop, these violations of due process rights and civil rights. So fund, legal representation. Those are the people that are on the front lines right now.
So there are organizations like Baker Ripley,
yes,
who you represent, and have an excellent track record of supporting the community, and not only in legal rights for immigrations, but helping seniors and just a whole spectrum of services. So is there a number that people can reach out to Baker Ripley, or a website?
Yes. So if you go to www.bakerripley.org, there's going to be links there on how to contribute and also how to volunteer with our agency. So we welcome volunteers to come and volunteer with us, not just in immigration program, but in all of our programs. And that's the best way to start to get engaged with our agency.
Excellent. So again, let's give that number out. I think it was 1-833-HOUIMMI, and that is the number to call for help. There are a number of you that are on the ground. What made you personally take on law as your profession in this area, actually?
Yeah. I always like to say that I'm not really a lawyer. I'm just a immigrant advocate who realized that a law degree would help me be the most powerful version of me. So I went to university in Miami, at the University of Miami, and got to travel to South America and Central America and really see the struggles that were going on in those countries and see the reasons why people flee to the United States. And feeling very powerless that you can't solve these problems in these countries abroad, I realized that if you could focus on at least protecting and saving the people who have made it here and want to stay here and want to live the American dream, then that's your kind of little way that you can make the big impact in the world. And so instead of studying those countries and doing what I thought I was going to do, which was Latin American politics and political science, I left a master's program and went right into law school, realizing that immigration is kind of the closest thing that you can do to real human rights work here in the United States.
Right. Oh, wow. So you're making a tremendous impact. Folks can volunteer. I have one other question, and then I have a public service announcement to make for an organization, but is there a difference in how people are treated coming in from across, those that are coming across the border as to those who are coming in other ways, maybe overstaying their visas?
Yes, so when you overstay a visa, you do become what we call undocumented, which means if you do have an encounter with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, they can place you in removal deportation proceedings. But those who are arriving at the border and are then placed in deportation proceedings do have a little less rights or less ability to be removed from or to leave detention. For example, certain groups that we call arriving aliens have no right to get a bond to leave detention, have to fight their case from detention. So it is a different group. I think also when the government makes a point to try to characterize a single group of people as all gang members, all bad people, the government agents that are enforcing the law on the border are going to reflect that attitude.
Right.
We see tons. There's a new report that just came out from Human Rights First, which is amazing, about all of the human rights violations that happen along the southern border and in the detention centers. Violations that often go unnoticed because these are immigrants. These are not individuals who understand their rights in the United States and are oftentimes deported and have no way to kind of, fight back or file lawsuits that are based on violations of their civil and human rights. So there is a lot that I think the public can start to focus on, or we can, pull back and expose that. And I think that it's great that there's national attention on immigration right now because there is so much that deserves to receive this attention. And I think we've shown that when the public realizes what's going on and they're outraged, that you can create change.
Yeah. So should the public put a pressure on our government to change how the detention status is and make sure that, pull them to the fire in regards to bringing those family members together or putting a plan together?
Absolutely. We should be holding Immigration, Customs Enforcement, Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Patrol, Health and Human Services. Absolutely should be holding them accountable to reunite families, make sure these children are healthy, make sure they're taken care of. What are the standards in the adult detention centers? Access to immigration counsel. If you're a child facing deportation,
Your favorite radio station. This is Afrovibes Radio Houston.